The quiet town of Maplebrook was known for its foggy mornings and lush green hills, but the Palmer family was looking for a fresh start, not a picturesque setting. Greg Palmer, a single father, was moving his two children, 12-year-old Ben and 9-year-old Lucy, into an old house at the edge of town, one he hoped would offer them a new beginning after the sudden passing of his wife. The house was larger than they expected, but something about it felt off. "Almost there," Greg said as the car rumbled up a gravel driveway. The old house loomed ahead, standing tall like a forgotten relic of another time, its wooden panels cracked and weathered. "It looks like a haunted house," Lucy whispered, staring at it with wide eyes. Ben scoffed, tapping on his phone without looking up. "Creepy. But kinda cool." Greg chuckled, though a strange chill ran down his spine. "It's just an old house," he reassured them, grabbing the keys from his pocket. "Let's get settled in." Inside, the house was quiet, with the faint scent of dust lingering in the air. It had been abandoned for years, and the weight of its history seemed to press down on Greg as they walked through the rooms. The kids split up to explore, Ben darting up the stairs to check out the bedrooms, while Lucy wandered toward the back of the house. That's where she found it, a narrow, creaky staircase leading up to the attic. "Dad, can I go up?" she called. Greg, busy with unpacking, waved her off. "Just be careful, okay?" Lucy slowly ascended the staircase, pushing open the door at the top to reveal a dark, musty attic filled with forgotten furniture covered in white sheets. The only light came from a small, grimy window, casting long shadows across the room. In the corner, something caught her eye, a large wooden chest, half buried under some old boxes. Curiosity piqued, Lucy knelt down and pried the chest open. Inside, she found a collection of old toys, hand-carved wooden dolls, tin soldiers, and wind-up animals with chipped paint. They were clearly old but beautifully made, each one bearing intricate details that hinted at the craftsmanship of a master toy designer. At the bottom of the chest was a peculiar jack-in-the-box, its paint worn and faded. Without thinking, Lucy began turning the crank. A familiar, tinny melody filled the air, sending shivers down her spine. But when the jack-in-the-box popped open, what emerged wasn't a cheerful clown. Instead, a twisted, gnarled figure leapt out, its hollow eyes seemed to stare straight into her soul. Lucy dropped the toy with a gasp, backing away. The jack-in-the-box lay on its side, and for a moment, she could have sworn it was smiling at her. That night, strange things began to happen in the Palmer house. Lucy woke up to find the toys from the attic sitting on her windowsill, though she was certain she had left them downstairs. Ben dismissed her concerns as childish imagination, but as the days passed, even he couldn't ignore the oddities, the faint sound of footsteps in the hall when no one was there, objects moving on their own, and the soft, eerie laughter Lucy swore came from the jack-in-the-box. Greg, growing concerned, began to research the house's history. He discovered that the house had once belonged to a man named Arthur Hexley, a brilliant but reclusive toymaker. Hexley had lived there with his two children, but one day, they mysteriously vanished. No one knew what happened to them, though some locals whispered about dark rituals and curses. As Greg delved deeper, he learned that Hexley had been obsessed with creating lifelike toys, some of which he claimed were enchanted with special powers. But it wasn't until Greg found an old newspaper article buried in the town library's archives that he learned the truth. Hexley's children hadn't just vanished. They had been trapped in the very toys their father had created. One night, as Ben lay in bed, he felt something crawl across his legs. He bolted upright, heart pounding, and saw one of the wooden dolls from the attic sitting at the foot of his bed, its painted eyes glinting in the moonlight. When he tried to throw it away the next day, it reappeared, this time with a sinister crack in its carved face, as if it had been grinning. The toys were no longer just creepy relics, they were alive. And they were angry. Lucy, meanwhile, had become strangely attached to the jack-in-the-box. She spent hours turning its crank, laughing along with the twisted figure that popped out. But soon, her behavior began to change. She became distant, often muttering to herself in a voice that wasn't quite her own. One night, Greg found her sitting in the dark, cradling the jack-in-the-box like a cherished friend. When he tried to take it from her, she screamed, a horrible, guttural sound that didn't seem to belong to a 9-year-old girl. Her eyes flashed with something cold, something ancient. "She's ours now," she whispered, her voice unnervingly deep. Terrified, Greg realized that his daughter was being possessed by the spirit of one of Hexley's lost children. The toymaker had cursed his own creations, binding his children's souls into the toys in a twisted attempt to keep them alive forever. Now, those spirits had found new victims. Desperate to save Lucy, Greg and Ben barricaded themselves in the attic, searching for a way to break the curse. As they rifled through old papers, they discovered Hexley's diary, which detailed his dark experiments. The only way to free the spirits trapped within the toys was to destroy the original source of their power, the Jack-in-the-Box. But the toys had other plans. That night, as the wind howled outside, the toys came to life, creeping through the halls of the house. The wooden dolls scratched at the doors, and the wind-up animals scuttled across the floors with unnatural speed. Greg and Ben fought them off as best they could, but the toys were relentless, driven by the malevolent spirits inside them. In a final, desperate act, Greg smashed the Jack-in-the-Box with a hammer. The house shook violently, the toys let out a high-pitched scream, and Lucy collapsed to the floor, the dark presence inside her finally expelled. The curse was broken, but the cost was high. As the Palmer family stood outside the burning remains of the house, watching the flames consume the last of Hexley's cursed toys, they thought they were free. But as they drove away, Greg glanced in the rearview mirror and froze. Sitting in the back seat was one of the wooden dolls, its carved grin wider than before.